blessing, the strength of love. I bring it forth today, sending it on today, out to the hills above. For I am blessing the strength of love. Breathing the strength of love. Born from the strength of love.
Well, thanks again. Good morning. There was a man who was looking for the perfect gift for his wife, and he thought, I know, we'll get a pet. He goes to the pet shop, he wants to get a talking bird. And so the guy behind the counter showed him some talking birds, and there's one that talked and sung. So he thought, oh wow, a talking, singing bird, that's perfect. So he buys the bird, brings it home. Next day he comes back to the shop, talks to the guy behind the counter, says, the bird just does nothing but stand there and look at me. He hasn't sung, he hasn't talked since I brought him home. And the guy behind the counter says, well, does he peck on his bell at all? He goes, bell? What bell? He goes, oh, we got bells here for sale, $9.95. So he takes home the bell, puts the bell in the cage. Next day he's back. Bird just kind of sits there and looks at me again all day long. Says, well, does the bird ever swing on the swing? He says, what swing? Well, we got swings for sale here, $11.95. Buys a swing, brings it home. Next day the man's back at the shop. He says, well, the bird finally talked. And the bird said, food, water. And sometimes we get caught up at Christmas. It's like, oh, I need to get the perfect gift. And sometimes the most simplest of gifts can be the ones that are the most powerful and the most touching. So, one of those gifts can be that gift of love. And this month we've been observing Advent. This was a ritual that was actually formed in the 400s. And of course, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we've got the dwindling of daylight that happens, of course, December 21st or 22nd, depending upon where the leap years fall. That's that day with the shortest amount of daylight. And then early Christians added 3 days for the 3 days of the new moon, and that's how Christmas fell on December 25th. So it's the birth of light, the rebooting of light. But even when things are getting their darkest and darkest, we find that we can draw the gifts of Spirit, and that's where the Advent comes in: faith, peace, love, and joy. So the first 2 Sundays were faith and peace, and then this Sunday we're going to talk about love. And you'll notice that the next candle is actually pink, since it's right before Christmas, kind of like the new dawn of the day. So, let's talk about love. Seems like maybe everyone feels like, okay, they know about love. And I know Carla and I had a wonderful friend, a minister who's passed away now, Maya, who used to talk about the 3 general categories of love. And first one is, the erotic or romantic love. That's that's one a lot of people are familiar with. But then there's the family love, that sense of brother, sister, mother, father. You have that love in that. But then she says, then there's the divine love, agape love, unconditional love that's there for all of us. And if you've noticed, it seems to come from within, out of nowhere, where we can express love at any time or anywhere. Question is, how many times we actually do that? We are one with others. We're one with God. Ed Rabel, the late professor at Unity Seminary, talked about. He came up with a definition for unconditional love. He goes, unconditional love is wanting the highest good for yourself, but also the highest good for everybody else. Just to see everybody else express their highest good. So part of the symbolism here is that rebirth of the expression of love from within us. So regardless of what's happening in your life, remember that you're always connected with God. If you don't think you are or don't feel you are, it's because we've deluded ourselves into feeling like we've lost that connection. And the reason that the writer of the Gospel of Matthew put the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem was first That was the hometown of David, who was the hero of the Jews. So Matthew was trying to preach to the Jews that yes, Jesus is the Messiah that we've been waiting for. But Bethlehem was a dingy little town, south of Jerusalem. And so here we've got the birth coming in a dingy little town, and not just in a dingy little town, but in the barn out back of the inn. Right? There's no room at the inn, but here in the barn. And if you've ever been in a barn with livestock, you know what it looks like. You know what it feels like, the itchiness of the straw, but you also know what it smells like. And yet, something great can happen there. There can be the expression of peace, of faith, of love, of joy. This can come at the moment when we're feeling like we're in the worst possible position that we could be in. And it comes from within us. In the book of Isaiah, 54th chapter, 10th verse, the writer says, "For the mountains may depart and the hills may be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says Jehovah, who has compassion for you." There was a woman who had a greenhouse, just kind of a small greenhouse behind her house, but a friend was visiting and looking at the beautiful flowers, and here was this golden chrysanthemum. And she looks down, and there's this old, rusty, dented pail that the chrysanthemum is growing out of. And she says, what's the deal with the pail? She says, well, I ran out of pots, and I thought to myself, a flower as beautiful as this wouldn't mind starting out its life in a rusty, dented pail. So how many times have we found that, out of the rusty, dented pail, something beautiful can grow? In unity, we often talk about, do not judge by appearances, but judge by right judgment. Sometimes the gifts of Spirit are not wrapped in the most pleasant-looking things, or the pleasant-smelling things, or the smelling or feeling things. Can we look beyond the outer appearances? The Gospel of Matthew, 22nd chapter, 37th verse. Jesus is asked, what's the greatest of the commandments? And Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. And there's a second commandment like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Even if we're not in a loving mood, if we can move past that initial instinct to not love and actually express love, what a difference that'll make. And whatever energy we put out comes back to us multiplied. So if we're willing to make that loving mood in a moment where it doesn't seem like love could have possibly existed, you can change the situation. You can change the world. As I've mentioned before, the second commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If we're not feeling very good about ourselves, sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge to feel loving towards somebody else. And yet this is the thing we want the most. We want to feel loved. We want to feel appreciated. We want to feel noticed. So if you've ever been on an airliner, they give you the safety talk at first. Just if an oxygen mask falls from the ceiling, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping your children or anybody else. Otherwise, you're gonna black out. So sometimes when you're not feeling love, the best thing you can do is to express love. There was a man who described growing up in Baltimore years ago near the Johns Hopkins Clinic and Hospital, one of the best hospitals, of course, in the country. But he said that many of the houses right near the clinic and the hospital there would have rooms for rent for people who had to come in for medical treatment. And he remembers this one night his mother was making supper at about 5 o'clock, and there was a knock at the door, and he went and kind of watched as his mother came to the door, and she said, there was this man standing at the door who was really hard to look at. He was short, he was old, but the whole left side of his face was just inflamed and red and raw. And the man said, I'm wondering if you have a room to rent tonight, because I've been looking since noon, and everybody says that they've got their rooms booked up. And first her mother was like, "Yeah, well, our rooms are booked up too." He says, "Well, you've got a rocking chair here on the porch. Is it okay if I could sleep in that tonight?" He says, I'm sure that part of the problem is the way I look. It, a lot of people just feel like they need to turn me away." He said he watches his mother say, "No, that's okay. We'll find some room for you here tonight. As a matter of fact, I'm just making supper. Why don't you sit and relax in the chair while I finish making supper, and you can come in and eat with us as well." So supper was ready. She invited the strange man in. His name was Henry. And Henry sat at the table with them, and they started just talking about it. First thing, that the the kids were asking about why his face looks different than everybody else. And he said, "Well, I've got skin cancer, and they've been treating my face." And so they learned about Henry. And here is Henry just exuding love as he's talking about and answering their questions. It turns out he's a fisherman on the eastern shore of Maryland. He also had a garden, and he it ends up he was supporting his daughter. He was supporting his son-in-law and their two children. The son-in-law had broken his back and couldn't work at that time, so they were living with him, and they were taking care of them. And it turns out that she pulled out an army cot after dinner and set it up so he'd have a place to sleep inside. And he just was so grateful. And the next morning, Mom got up and she found that Henry was up, ready to catch the morning bus at 7 a.m. He had neatly folded all of his linens and stuff, and he said, "Thank you so much, for being willing to take me in." Says your children really made me feel welcome and loved. Because it's funny how children don't get as caught up in appearances like my face appears like right now. I have to come back for treatments here every few months. Is it okay if I stay with you? And she said, "Yes, of course. You can stay with us." And the next time Henry showed up, he showed up with a freshly caught fish and a bucket of shucked oysters. And there'd be times even between the treatments that they get an express package from Henry with oysters or fish or freshly washed spinach or kale. He would just send it. And he was just such a loving man. They really were enjoying all of his times visiting. And the guy who wrote this story talked about his mother having a conversation with him the following day. It turns out that one of the neighbors who also had a room to rent was outside, and talking with her mother and saying, "Did you allow that guy to come in and stay with you last night? Oh, why would you want to do that? You might drive away other people who want to rent rooms from you." And his mother, talking with him afterwards, just says, "Just think if we had turned him away, we wouldn't have had a chance to really understand who Henry was and to open our hearts to Henry and allow him to open his hearts to us." So, as this week unfolds, look for ways to express love, especially at those times when it doesn't look like love is exactly what you want to express. But don't judge by appearances. The letter to the Galatians, 5th chapter, 22nd verse. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness. So even when things do seem the darkness, yes, we can express faith, we can express peace, we can express love. So allow that in this coming week, I'll have Duncan put up the takeaways, that Christmas is a rebirth of all of these gifts of Spirit. And of course, it can be a rebirth of love, another opportunity for us to break through any resistance that we have to these things. We can express love at any time. It's usually best to express love at the times when we're not quite feeling particularly loving. Look beyond the outer appearances. Yes, sometimes we have certain things appear in our lives, but, as I say often, okay, God, show me the good in this. Because I know everything that happens in my life is an opportunity for spiritual growth. And then remember that Jesus said the greatest commandment is love, the thing we want the most, the thing we want to express the most. Pope John Paul II once said, "The worst prison of all would be a closed heart." So be willing to open your heart this week, to express love as often as you can. Jesus taught us ways to act and to live. So keep in the forefront of your mind love. I want to show you a video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
Ma'am, how are you doing today? You ready for Christmas?
A lot of people ignore the homeless, but folks rushing past Moses Elder may regret their haste. Because this week, all people had to do was pay him some attention,
Ladies!
and he would pay them back
We want you to have
in Benjamins.
So that's $100.
You can imagine the shock.
That's what Christmas is all about.
Moses' mission was financed by Secret Santa, the same anonymous wealthy businessman who every year goes around the country handing out $100 bills to random strangers. But this holiday season, in addition to his normal giving, he came here to Phoenix and recruited this most unlikely, homeless elf.
I want to enlist you to help me. So here's what we're going to do.
He gave Moses about $3,000 with the instruction to give it away to whoever he saw fit.
I think this will be a joyful experience for him. It's a myth that, the homeless just take. From my experience, the people at least give the most of what they have.
We saw that too. Danny McCoy put change in the cup, even though he has 7 kids, and until this moment, had no idea how he was going to buy Christmas presents. And that's the kind of relief Moses brought to so many here. Most of those he blessed were strangers who just happened by. But not all. He gave this guy from church $400. He gave this homeless mother of 5 $500.
And remember, people appreciate you, but you're too really talented to take care of your kids the way you do. Okay?
Of course, in the end, Secret Santa also gave Moses some money to keep for himself.
This here is a little bit for me.
But he says that reward pales to the joy he received from helping others.
Today we changed a lot of people's lives. But I believe my life has changed the most. God bless you all.
He says even when you're homeless, it feels so much better to give than receive.
I don't know, I'm happy to go. Kindness is a bridge between all people. And so if you're ever down, you want to lift yourself up, go do something kind for somebody. Maybe that'll help you.
It'll make you feel like way more than $100.
There you go. That's okay.
Steve Hartman,
That's okay.
on the road in Phoenix.
Yes, that's okay.
Bible verse from the Gospel of John, 13th chapter, 34th verse. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's prepare for meditation.
When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. Right here, right now.
Relax. Be still. Go within. Feel the relaxing wave go from the crown of your head to the bottom of your feet. All tension and anxiety just flowing out your fingertips and toes. Draw your focus from your head down to your heart. And from your heart to the center of your torso. The center of the spiritual being, having the human being experience. The gateway of chi. Allow any illusion of separation between ourselves and God to just melt away. And we take some time in this meditation to pray. And in unity, whenever we pray, we include prayers for others. So bring to mind any individuals, any families, any groups, organizations, situations, or circumstances that you'd like to pray for now. We include the prayer requests written and placed in our prayer request box out in the foyer, and any other prayer requests received at Unity of Tampa this week. And we see and know that the divine perfection is in and expressing through each of these prayer requests as their highest good, today and every day hereafter. Let's now pray for Unity of Tampa. We now deny, dissolve, and release any thoughts or feelings of lack or limitation for Unity of Tampa. The God presence as Unity of Tampa is a divine magnet, attracting anyone who can benefit from who we are and what we are about, attracting wealth, health, prosperity, love, joy, and inner peace to Unity of Tampa and all who come here right now. And I invite you to take the words I'm about to speak as your very own prayer words this morning. God, I now release resentment, anger, judgment. The love of God is expressed by all of us this Christmas. The love of God is expressed right now. I express a loving and forgiving heart. And as I prepare for 3 minutes of silence, I now open my heart and feel divine substance flow as I embrace the divine idea of love in the silence. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. As I move forward in this week, I remember that Christmas is a rebirth. It is a rebirth of peace, faith, love, and joy. I remember that I can express love at any time. I look beyond outer appearances to see the divine in all. And I remember that the greatest commandment is to love. Today I am renewed in spirit. I am filled with thoughts of love. I am one with the universe. I am God's creation of love. And I express love light into our world. And I now release this prayer into the spiritual realm and know that perfect results are unfolding. And as we draw our attention back to the sanctuary, let's say together the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we have forgiven our debtors. And leave us not in temptation, and deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.